Good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. If you just walked in, there is still plenty of room in the front, so feel free to come forward and join us here in Farish Gallery for our event tonight. Again, good evening and welcome. My name is Igor Marjanovic, and I have a great honor to serve as the Dean of the Rice School of Architecture. And also a great pleasure to welcome you tonight to our very special event co-organized with the Architectural League of New York, titled Arch League in Houston, an Intergenerational Conversation. So before we start with that conversation, I'm also reminded today is March 8th. I grew up in socialist Yugoslavia. That was a national holiday, so there was no school on that day, but we would come for one class to talk about social progress we've made in the past year to build a more equitable society. And we were asked to come with special suggestions for readings and quotes. And I want to share a few quotes that I was able to dig out from some of the old Yugoslav socialist handbooks. One of them is by Rosa Luxemburg, who said, quote, "A woman's freedom is the sign of social freedom," end quote, suggesting that what affects one social group affects actually all of us. The other one, very pertinent today, is by Clara Zetkin, quote, "The workers have nothing to gain from this war, but they stand to lose everything that is dear to them," end quote. And it was a quote specifically referring to the First World War and the idea that politicians often create a state of distraction to distract us from the main causes of the social progress in the society. So that was happening in the First World War, probably not happening as much today, or maybe even more so, but I'll refrain from any political jokes from that, for that matter. So I do refer to this particular holiday, the International Women's Day, because I do believe that being an architect is also an identity category. We are also a social group that needs to think about what we stand for, what we fight for, and also what is our voice. And this notion of the idea of a voice and a disciplinary voice made me think about the Architectural League of New York, and I would like to think that the titles of their awards, the League Prize and the Emerging Voice, are not coincidental. It is the idea that as a public platform, they support the public voice of architects and what we can do to change the society that we live in and what we stand for as a discipline. In that sense, the Arch League is very parallel to the Rice School of Architecture. In many ways, we share a mission and a vision, which is to promote a discourse about the built environment and to advocate for its progressive transformation. At Rice School of Architecture, we do not only educate architects, but we also amplify their voices. Our job is not just to build a curriculum, but also to build a discourse in the field of architecture more broadly. Like the Arch League, we build discourse through our programs, events, and publications, and a form of public engagement that advances the role of architecture, urbanism, and design in a very dynamic and even changing world. And speaking of curriculum, this is not the last event for this weekend. We had a symposium on fiber futures yesterday, organized by Jesus Vassallo and Brett Schneider. We have this event today. Tomorrow, the national accrediting team is coming to Rice to give us our 8th year, accreditation. So if you walk through our hallways, you will see an exhibition of student work showcasing the work of the students and the faculty and celebrating our curriculum. So take a moment to check it out as you walk around MD Anderson Hall. I'm also reminded that as a School of Architecture, we not only build a beautiful program and curriculum, but also we celebrate beautiful buildings. And I'm reminded today that we are in this very special space, the Farish Gallery, designed by James Sterling and Michael Wilford, with two beautiful monumental walls flanking the main public space of our building. The old building by Staubenrader, 1947 wing facing the main quad, the new Kennedy Hall designed by Karamoko, and then finally the renovation of the MD Anderson Hall and some of the historic restoration done by a Chicago firm, Kwong Wonglinov, who too are not strangers to the Arch League program as well. It's also interesting that all of these buildings have been built by teams and pairs of architects, suggesting that what we do is really truly a collective effort. And one final parallel between the Arch League and the Rice School of Architecture is that we are both rooted in our own context. Arch League in the city of New York, Rice School of Architecture here in the city of Houston, but we are small but mighty. We do things that have national and international relevance. And through that process, we also built over the years many bridges between Houston and New York and the Rice School of Architecture and the Arch League, including through many winners, some of which Anne will mention in just one second. I'm thankful to Jacob Moore, the League's Executive Director, and Anne Rieselbach, Programs and Membership Director, for a wonderful collaboration in making this event a reality. It all started as a casual dinner conversation, but it quickly snowballed into a major event. And if you ever talk to Anne, you know, I thought I was a fast talker and multitasker until I met her, and it quickly became a reality that it is today. And I'm really thankful to Jacob and Anne for this collaboration. Would like to welcome them to the podium to also address the group. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Igor. As he said, I'm Jacob Moore. I'm the Executive Director of the Architectural League. We're really, really honored and grateful, as Igor said, right back in Rice's direction. And before proceeding, I just want to offer some more specific thanks, in addition to Igor, to Carlos Jimenez, to Tara Aluafemi, Judith Caldwell, and Leah Ray from the Rice team. This has really been an all-hands effort. To Sebastian Construction Group, and John Sebastian and Whitney Pastore, who really made this thing possible. To the Architectural League's Board of Directors, several of whom are here, over here, and over here, joining us on this trip. And also to funders over the years of the League Prize and Emerging Voices, which we'll hear more about soon, but including Elise Jaffe and Jeffrey Brown, of course, without whom none of this would have been possible. And then, as Igor was alluding to, the incredible team of the League, really the programs team, especially led by Anne Rieselbach, but also Zoe Fruchter, who's the program manager, has, I'm sure, no doubt, here she is, right in front of me, interfaced with all of you already at this point. Cameron King, who's our Director of Development and Communications, Dan Chofie, and then back in New York, Damasi Darby Washington and Sophie Smith. This has been a big lift, but one that has brought a lot of joy and excitement to the League, and it's a really incredible team who's pulled it off. So briefly about the League, for those that don't know, just to extend some of what Igor shared, the League was founded in 1881 as a forum for architects and other practitioners of the built environment to help one another improve their work, put simply. So though much has changed, thankfully, since the Gilded Age when we were founded, although maybe not as much as we would like, that guiding principle of voluntary association and mutual improvement remains foundational to everything that we do today. In the winter of 2023-2024, we updated our mission to bring a bit more focus to that ongoing work, and I'll just read it really quickly to you. The Architectural League of New York supports critically transformative work in the allied fields that shape the built environment. As a vital, independent forum, the League stimulates thinking, debate, and action on today's converging crises of racism, inequity, and climate change in service of a more livable and just world. So this work takes many, many forms, from lectures to publications to exhibitions to gatherings of all other kinds and different levels of formality. And I encourage you to check out our website to learn more about us. And an enormous part of this work across all of those formats is supporting the growth, well-being, and impact of successive generations of designers. And tonight's event, I'm very happy to share, forms part of a reinvigoration and a rededication of what we're now calling our Next Generation initiative. So this initiative includes both the League Prize and Emerging Voices, which you've heard about and Anne will share more about, and then we'll hear much more about over the course of the evening. But also two other programs that are very important to us, our student program and our mentorship program. Both of these sort of in tandem support architecture students with information, access, and guidance at those ever so crucial early stages of students' careers. For the mentorship program in particular, we work with New York City area public schools in an effort to focus on many first generation, often otherwise underserved entrants into the field. And the field, you know, so desperately needs their voices, so we're really happy to support them as they're getting going. So seen together under this Next Generation umbrella, the idea is to support the cultivation of talent across the spectrum, from students taking their first steps into the field to professionals building and testing new areas of practice. The holistic approach ensures participants have access to mentorship, to resources, and to recognition at the moments when they need it most. So there's an insert you hopefully have all seen in your programs where you can learn more about the Next Generation Initiative. And if you're able to offer your support, any amount makes a really, really big difference as we work to ensure that these critical programs are able to continue and find success. So finally, I'm going to pass the mic to Anne. But before she comes up, I just want to reiterate my gratitude and really awe of Anne Rieselbach. She's the League's Program and Membership Director. She's been the driving force behind, everyone here knows Anne Rieselbach, and if you don't in the audience, you can and must this evening. But she has been the driving force behind both of these prizes and so many other programs at the League for nearly their entire lives. She is the one person, if there's one person who's shaped them into what they are today, she is that person. So we're all have a big debt of gratitude to Anne Rieselbach, and a lot of what we'll hear today, has flowed through and been shaped by her ever-capable hands. So anyway, thank you, Anne, and I'll pass it to you now to say a bit more about the evening.
I'll try not to talk too quickly, even though it is something I do a lot of. As you all, at this point, know, I'm Anne Rieselbach, the League's Program Membership Director. Hard reading something that you've already written. I'd like to add a welcome to the sizable gathering of past winners of the Architectural League Prize for Young Architects and Designers and Emerging Voices program. It's a remarkable group whose participation spans the close to 45-year history of these programs. Some quick background notes about each program to set the scene. Both Emerging Voices and the League Prize, formerly titled the Young Architects Forum, were launched during the League's centennial to provide an opportunity for promising younger and early mid-career practitioners to present important and thought-provoking work to their peers and the greater design community. The kind of critical recognition and intergenerational engagement that has been a part of the League's mission since its founding in 1881. Both programs are open to firms from throughout North America and are juried by peers who have a familiarity with each program, as well as an ever-shifting combination of journalists, curators, architects, landscape architects, and urbanists, a number with at least 1 foot in academia. Each program has a slightly different selection process and focuses on successive career phases of the design profession. And in short, the League Prize is a juried, open, anonymous portfolio competition organized around a theme for young architects and designers 10 years or less out of an undergraduate or master's program. The work can be built or unbuilt, pragmatic or speculative, but must always fall under the rubric of what the League mission now refers to, and as Jacob cited, critically transformative work. Competition winners have often remarked that the preparation of their lecture, installation, and related League interviews and texts spurs them to take the time, even while early in their careers, to reconsider the meaning and direction of their work, to see where they have come since the school, and to think about future goals. Emerging Voices is an invited competition for individuals or firms with distinct design voices and an accomplished body of realized work that has the potential to influence the disciplines of architecture, landscape architecture, and urban design. Emerging Voices are also chosen with an eye to candidates' engagement with educational or community concerns. Each cycle, the jury strives to select a broad geographic distribution of firms, as well as a collection of work that both accurately and compellingly represents the theoretical, typological, and tectonic variety of contemporary practice. Beyond their anchoring in the League's mission, the common theme shared by both programs is the expectation that the winners express a distinct point of view and that their work points to the agency of architecture and design. In recent years, juries have been particularly responsive to individuals and firms who are addressing pressing contemporary issues, from climate change and resource extraction to social inequities and exploitative labor practices. And in addition to dialogues between speakers and moderators during the program, some cycles with expanded post-lecture roundtables, the League has occasionally convened large intergenerational gatherings of Emerging Voices and League Prize winners in New York City during program anniversaries of the League Prize, and about a decade ago on the occasion of the comprehensive publication Idea, Form, and Resonance, 30 Years of Emerging Voices. The book also prompted us to take the show on the road, so to speak, first in San Francisco with a gathering of almost all of the Bay Area's Emerging Voices and a roundtable the following year with League Prize winners. More recently, we organized a study trip to Mexico City, spotlighting examples of work by winners, as well as some notable design landmarks in the city, of course, and then a party hosted by Liga brought everyone together. This year's trip to Houston is the first time, but as Jacob described, or will describe later on, not the last, where we will be building on these experiences to hold combined next-gen discussions, dialogues, and gatherings in cities throughout North America. I'd like to add my thanks to the Rice School of Architecture for making tonight's program possible, and add that in addition to tonight's lineup of emerging voices and League Prize winners currently working in Texas, Rice has launched or fostered the careers of many other past League Prize winners and emerging voices, including Liz Galvez, whose League Prize exhibit was presented here in the Farish Gallery not so long ago and documented for her online installation. Recent faculty members Lap Shi Kwang and Allison von Glino, who, as Igor mentioned, were responsible for the renovation of the space around us, as well as past faculty and visiting fellows, including Tay Carpenter, Michelle Jacek Chang, and Michael Bell. A number of winners are also Rice graduates, including Los Angeles-based Kevin Daly, who is here tonight, who just led our group. We've been on a study tour for the last 2.5 days, so we're all kind of limping around at this point. But he led the New York contingent through the Houston Endowment Building, which is a really spectacular piece of architecture. And was designed, in fact, in partnership with another past League Prize winner and emerging voice, Productura. The list of Rice-affiliated speakers tonight, whether graduates, faculty, or both, includes the partners of Taft Architects, David Heyman, part of the time, Gail Borden, Rob Rogers, Carlos Jimenez, Troy Shum, Maggie Sang, and Nathan Friedman, and I'm sure I've left someone out. As we compiled work by the past emerging voices and League Prize winners currently working in Texas who will be speaking this evening, we were struck by the sheer typological variety of projects, multivalent approaches to design, and diverse models of professional practice. Even the common denominator of, for the most part, working in Texas points to this state's diverse population as well as its vast and varied urban, suburban, and rural landscape. We've given the architects a close to impossible task: to prepare a maximum of 3 slides to illustrate a presentation that should touch on the work they were doing at the time of their League Prize or Emerging Voices Award, then reflect on how the award impacted their practice and career trajectory, and finally, to describe their current practice, all in under 5 minutes, to be followed by a short Q&A session with Igor and me. We'll try to guide and hopefully at least touch on some of the aesthetic, functional, social, and ecological impact of the work. The common, or maybe uncommon, mix of accomplishment and ongoing curiosity to explore new ideas shared by these firms is not coincidental, but instead what inspires League Prize winners and emerging voices. It is what sets them apart from their peers as they continually reevaluate and renew their ideas, setting new goals for themselves and for the profession. And on behalf of the League, I'm looking forward to seeing and hearing where each firm has been, where they were at the time they presented their work, and about their current projects and the thoughts in general of this accomplished group. The meter's running. Let's go.
My name is Ursula Kripa. This is my partner, Stephen Mueller, and we are taking the 5 minutes very seriously, so I will be reading. Thank you. So when we got the Emerging Voices Award in 2018, we had only been a few years in our new context working in El Paso in this vital but contested context. Our work at the time was focused on built projects and investigations that advocate for spatial justice and provide counter-narratives to forms of spatial oppression. This image is of our installation a few years later at the exhibit Columbus. It's an important example of our thinking at the time. Like much of our work, the project seeks to forge new publics in response to such sub-perceptual phenomena. In this case, the advent of increased multispectral surveillance of public space is counteracted by a custom-fabricated architectural assembly that distorts machine vision and reclaims public space. The design is low-cost, lightweight, and self-structural, meant to easily be deployed for pop-up demonstrations and gatherings that demand anonymity and autonomy.
Yeah, so around the same time, and building on some continued threads that were in our work, we actually set out to found a dedicated research center that's we call POST, Project for Operative Spatial Technologies, and that's housed at Texas Tech University's satellite campus in El Paso, where we're based. Post operates kind of as an alter ego to agency. It provides some affordances and some room for some different kinds of speculations, curiosities, and partnerships from within the institution. The Research Center provides a platform for developing public work and advocacy that's centered on the challenges of environmental and spatial justice in transboundary, urban, and ecological conditions. A major thread of the work that we've been developing over the past 5 years or so is what we call our ultra-violent exposures project. The works involve developing custom computational mapping, environmental analysis, and design tools to combat the slow violence of ultraviolet radiation, which asymmetrically impacts low-income borderland communities. Our tools and maps help designers and communities see the radiated environment that we live in differently and plan and design to protect the most vulnerable among us. The center itself has grown radically in the last few years thanks to the support of a large Mellon Foundation grant and other federal funding from NSF. And we're working with a really broad and diverse team. So we're working with oral historians, environmental nonprofits, artists, community members, activists, to realize a series of public exhibits and a project website to share the histories and lives impacted by UV radiation in the borderland.
So then, since the League Emerging Voices Award, I've assumed a new role as director of the college, Texas Tech School of Architecture in El Paso, and I'm an associate vice provost for outreach and engagement, so sort of through administrative kind of service, thinking through this idea of what does it mean to work with communities in education. So we've been working on large-scale social and environmental justice grant work with interdisciplinary and community teams. We're excited to report that our work is finding new audiences and new avenues for impact through the Research Center and our collaborations. Working with a nonprofit currently, this is a very early sketch. The bottom part is built already, but the idea is that we're providing free design services to a nonprofit that offers science classes education in an archaeological site that is important for sort of the entire North American continent. So the recently completed, this is under construction, the base has been built, but the shade structure is under design development, and it's going to be a reciprocal frame, so if you can imagine that, that accomplishes long spans with minimal material while providing UV damage or sort of protection against UV damage. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephen Cassell, Architecture Research Office. League Prize, or Young Architects as we thought of it at the time, 1996, that was ARO year 3. Architecture really was small-scale projects consisting of elements of architecture, a curved interlocking wall for a small office, a showroom's fabric ceiling sewn by our client's factory with arcs stretched, created by stretching the fabric along a series of cables, a steel plate fence mounted on W sections, sort of create deep reveals that sort of set up the rhythm of the city. Research consisted of exploration of these materials, and really we always think of research in our name as our design methodology, the start of the development design methodology. Office, at the time we were 6 people, much to the relief of our first employee, Monica Rivera. We had finally got out of the inverted pyramid management structure of more partners than employees, so that was a big thing. The League Prize really was the first time we had shown our work in public. It was a big thing. It was like, oh, maybe we're actually in office, which is a big deal. Emerging Voices, 2001, that was ARO year 8. Architecture, we pushed really from the beginning, but here is starting to show for a radical diversity of project types held together with a consistent design process. Whether it's a spa, Armed Forces Recruiting Station in Times Square, or Court 10 shingled house in Colorado, we really at the time were focusing on rigorously refining form and material. Research, at this time we had received our first externally funded research project from NISCA, a grant to look at the relationship of CAD, CAM, and craft, where we had an exhibition called Paper Wall, where the paper wall completely collapsed in the opening. If you don't test it to failure, it's not good. Office at 14 people, We had focused on our office. Really, at that time, we were defining it as the office as the most important design project, as how we're working, how our work evolves, and also starting the focus of the community of the office itself. We're a couple years into fulfilling our commitment of making sure there's always an equal balance of men and women in the office. And emerging voices really marked an important milestone that maybe we are actually in office here for a while. I remember the lecture also marked a time. I remember my Uncle Irving who came, who has no interest in architecture. I'm proud of you, kid. So you know, if your family thinks you have an office, that's good. And then now, year 32, architecture in the last 24 years since we've received emerging voices. We've expanded our definition of architecture really beyond form and material, focusing a lot more on our not-for-profit clients, and really trying to make sure our work positively impacts the world. Research has expanded to include both theoretical and technical investigations, while also expanding our design methodology, much deeper dives into our clients' missions and social context, and then finally, office. 35 people. We really define ourselves as a collective of like-minded people with a deep focus on culture and values of our firm, and our office continues to be our longest-running design project, always continuing to evolve. So to finish up, we're really looking forward to get the WV, the Waning Voices Award, sometime in the future, and so we'll see what happens from there. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Paola Aguirre. I'm an urban designer and partner at Borderless.
Hello, everybody. Dennis Milam, architect, partner at Borderless Studio.
And our main reflection today is about transitions. I think at the time that we were receiving this award, we were still very new. We were 5 years into our practice. I had started in 2016, Dennis joined in 2019, so we're still basically building our partnership. But we wanted to ask the question, like, what does it mean to stand by our values that we established to practice independently? What does it mean to practice spatial justice? What does it mean to practice equitable design? And what does it mean to work with communities? So a lot of our work that was taking place at that time, it was about framing issues, storytelling, finding our voice, and really thinking what was our place to reimagine public realm and working with neighborhoods, working with communities, in exhibits and installations in civic art, and community planning and design processes. We also were already a national practice. Many of our first projects were not only in Chicago. We were based in Chicago for 5 years as a practice, but quickly growing into the Midwest, working in Detroit and Kansas, even in the border region in Brownsville, Texas.
And so sticking to this theme of transitions, there was a major transition early on where we won a project in Brownsville, Texas, and that really brought us to reevaluate where we wanted to service that project from. It was a 2-year time span. And in the middle of the pandemic, we started to realize that we could practice a little bit differently and be remote, and our clients were getting used to that as well. And so very early on in that project, I got my license to practice in Texas, got it in the mail, held it up to Paula, and Paula was like, let's move to Texas. And that's basically how we got here. Okay. And so transitioning from Chicago to San Antonio has not been just a really straight line. We're still practicing quite a bit in Chicago. We have one employee that's still there that we're working in urban design projects, working on corridor plans, working on single-family homes and duplexes. We still try to engage with artists in Chicago, which you can see on the lower right-hand side, is working with a sculptor, Juan Angel Chavez, and we're trying to build that practice here in San Antonio in Texas as well.
One of the things that this prize brought us was national visibility. I think it gave credibility to the work that we've been investing and the energy investing in working with communities. One of our, the continuum of working with communities and thinking about, this idea between commission and self-initiated work. So one of our most dear projects is the one on the center in a closed school in Chicago, working 8 years now in that space, thinking like, how can we reimagine this very large problems and starting being nimble, but also transforming, a vacant lot in the south side of the city of Chicago into a vibrant space for community. So we continue to work nationally. We work with federal funds. God knows what's going to happen now with a lot of that as we're in this moment in time, but Choice Neighborhood Initiatives that helps us to work with communities in neighborhood planning and housing planning. Continuing our placemaking stewardship and what does it mean to create places with communities, but also just continue to ask the question, what does it mean to be a design practice that works with communities instead of communities?
One last thing that I would like to talk about is the Overton Exchange Plaza. In 2022, we opened up a Borderless Workshop, which is a nonprofit, and we were able to actually apply for some grants for this work that Paula started back in 2017 in really developing the public spaces. And that map that you see there of the city of Chicago is probably the 6th time it's been drawn, and it's going to be one of the last times it's drawn right there as you see it. But in 2022, from the city of Chicago, we received a $500,000 grant to reimagine this public spaces, and we were able to provide community gardens, the map that you see there, and continued programming. That's going to be continued on for the next 2 years that we're dealing with. So that's been an important project for us.
And some of the things is like, how do we translate these lessons from Chicago to San Antonio to some of the border communities that we want to engage with? So that's work in progress. Thank you.
Here? Yeah. Oh, thank you. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to have such esteemed colleagues to my right and all the audience here in this wonderful event that has finally happened. And I want to really take opportunity to perhaps reflect more on what this prize says have meant for me. My studio, which was founded in 1983. I opened a very small studio with my own house and a couple of remodelings. And in 1983, after completing the house, and then I began working on my studio and a couple of other projects. And by the end of 87 or early 1988, I had about 6 projects, which was apparently the limit to enter this competition that came to be, I became aware of it through a friend. And so I just sent the material, and fortunately we received the League Prize in 1988. But more importantly, it gave me an opportunity to reflect on what I was doing, what I believe in. And I was asked, all the participants were asked to write a short sort of statement. And I wrote it, and then they were very kind. They published it in the poster. But very importantly, at that moment in 1988 was that I wanted to define what I felt about architecture, something that has not really changed since 1983 or even before that. And I couldn't find better words than Rainer Maria Rilke in one of his elegies from the Duino Elegy number 9, where he says something that has always come closest to me to define what architecture means to me, and obviously by extension to my clients and those that I'm fortunate to work with and for. And that is a very simple statement where the poet says, perhaps we are here in order to say house, fountain, bridge, tree, at most tower, even perhaps a column. But we're here to say these things as the things themselves were not able to believe in their own existence. And that affected me in a very profound way, and I felt that that was the message I wanted to convey in this introduction. Later, I received the Emerging Voices Prize, and that was a wonderful surprise. And at that time, the studio had grown a bit, and we were doing these projects. And one of the marvelous things about this experience was that all this, at least during my period involved with the Architectural League, all the events would take place in the wonderful building by Marquette, Mead and White, the Villar houses. And it was always wonderful to visit this incredible building where the League had been operating for several years. And after this eventful award, I was very honored in the same year, in 1994, the same year, in the summer, I was invited, and I know that Anne was a great advocate of supporting us, and also Toshiko Mori, and we were given the opportunity to actually present a small exhibition. Each of us presented a project that was finished in that year of 1994. She presented this beautiful addition in Maine, and we showcased a building that we had just finished here in Houston, the administration and junior school, and you see elements of it in the exhibition, and each of us was given one of the two galleries. And these galleries were actually where the lectures were given, and it's a wonderful space. And also, to my great joy and happiness, in this beautiful building, there was also the Urban Center Books. So every visit that I would come to New York and visit the League was synonymous with a big bag of books that I would live with and return to Houston. So these were really very important years in my career, the first decade of my small practice, and really so memorable. I have so many wonderful memories. I just wanted to limit it to this, 1988 to 1994. And after that, all kinds of different projects came, different places. And I'm really very fortunate and grateful that I was part of this great program. So thank you all.
Hi, I'm David Heyman. When I got recognized by Emerging Voices in 2000, I was a professor at the University of Texas. I was nominated, in fact, by Larry Speck. Thank you, Larry. I really appreciate it still. I was had started a long series of very long essays for Places Journal about the thing that I was most interested in, the reason I was hired, which was the complex relationships of buildings and landscapes. And then in my very small practice, I had started this building on the left, which was a house for George W. and Laura Bush in Crawford. It was their only house in Texas, which I'll tell you now, it freaked out my academic colleagues, and it freaked out most of my other colleagues, and it still freaks them out. And it just does. They're like, where are you on the spectrum here? But I will tell you about this house, that the house was designed to be at the limit of what you could do then environmentally with normative construction of gang nail trusses, locally available materials and so forth. And it was designed to be off the grid and blah, blah, blah. The thing that was most interesting about it, though, was that it actually imagined, and this is partly arising from certain technical problems, like with insulation and so forth, that the house, you had to live it a different way. And so the house is like one room wide, and to get from the bedroom to the kitchen, or from the kitchen to the bathroom or the living room to the bathroom, you have to go outside. You have to keep going outside. And so it's two continuous porches. One's always in the sun, one's always in the shade, one's always in the wind, one's always not. So there's always a comfortable way. And then the cool thing is that the rainwater collection there happens at grade, which is actually inspired by the imperial villa at Katsura, which I never told the Bushes until years later. But what that meant was that when it rained, all the porches also became rooms, right? The water would drip off, and there was a big fireplace outside, and you could sit there. And I'll tell you that despite the fact that my colleagues were really freaked out, this was exactly the kind of commission I wanted. I mean, teaching in a state university system, I believe in the state university system. I believe that they serve very, very broadly with regard to architecture, that's their purpose. Their purpose is actually, and this is partly actually inspired by professors I had here at Rice, including Peter Rowe and John Kasparian and Michael Underhill. Just the idea that what you were searching for were models that you could share. And so the idea of making a kind of house that the idiots who were more or less ruining the rural and natural landscape of Texas might copy, because George Bush had done it, was really thrilling to me. That's not what happened. So 4 things got in the way. So one is that in August 2001, Architectural Record, they agreed to put this on the cover, and then September 11th, a few weeks later, that afternoon, I got a call from the Secret Service, the publication's off, get in all your drawings, burn everything, literally. And then the second thing was the economic slowdown that followed, which had an effect. The third thing actually is that by the time it came back, all the technologies had evolved. So 15 years later, I built a painting studio for George Bush on the right? And in the intervening years, all the technologies for insulation and for how the building might function now it was just basically a modern building. I actually don't like that. It's a nice building, don't get me wrong. But for me, the whole challenge of that the environment might rewrite how we thought about architecture had kind of slipped out the window in a way. And then the fourth thing that happened was Austin. I mean, it boomed. I was getting commissions like this is a 19,000 square foot house for one man and his 2 cats. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a nice house, dude. It functions environmentally really, really beautifully. It's just, the way it works. I won't go into that, right? And lifestyle-wise, there's a little bit of that, but really it's not. It's really a kind of different idea about the concentration of wealth and who was stiffening architecture and the way that was working. So I shouldn't complain. But of course, as an academic, I wrote this book called My Beautiful City, Austin, which is a story essentially of how young architects are complicit, my generation of architects are utterly complicit in the destruction of landscape, and covered over with these kinds of strange languages. I hope you read it. It's a crazy fictional book. My practice is still kind of ongoing, but one of the things that, the biggest change in my practice in the last 10 or 15 years is the degree to which I now engage students in directed research. And these are just 2 examples. The one on the top, a book that we published about the remarkable masterpiece, the house that John Chase built here in Houston for himself. And then the second one, the kind of ongoing project right now, it's actually both between my office and student work, the project to power all the public schools in the Galapagos with these public space solar collectors that do that kind of work, which is super interesting work. I mentioned just like with the Bush House, the Galapagos actually, it sounds, oh, I'm sorry. The Galapagos, super interesting because the 3 fastest towns in the world are there. It's not just a boondoggle for me to go there. 3 fastest towns in the world are occurring in the Galapagos. But this is where my practice has gone since that time. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Francisco Quiñones. Hi, I'm Nathan Friedman. We run Departamento del Distrito based in Mexico City. We were very fortunate to win the League Prize in 2022, so recent prize, recent work. Our installation for the League Prize, titled When Models Are Systems, was an adapted communications tower that produced its own energy and atmosphere. So here you can see an image from the opening on the roof of Laguna, which is a converted factory complex in Mexico City that I think the League has visited and dined in with Liga, which we weren't affiliated with the League yet, but we saw it online and we're very jealous. We wish we could be there. And well, in any case. So historically, I think it's interesting to mention that previous League Prize winners pre-pandemic they mounted an exhibition altogether in New York. And so during our year, it kind of shifted in the mode, and we had to do a site-specific installation. For us, that move to make it a site-specific installation was seen as an opportunity. For us, that meant working with an exterior condition that was in flux, allowing us to engage the politics of natural resource management and energy production in Mexico. So the tower plays host to an assemblage of devices that collectively measure, channel, and ultimately generate an exterior environment. Attached to a 7-meter tall tubular steel structure at varying heights, these devices ground electrical currents, measure humidity, collect rainwater, monitor wind flows, reflect light, and produce solar energy. So there's an 85-watt solar panel there on the side. This energy, in turn, powers integrated spotlights that illuminate the surrounding roof deck, loudspeakers synced to a great playlist, and misters that cool the air. A temporal space for gathering is produced. And for us, this interest in systems stems directly from an approach to architecture and design that is based in program, in operation, in the construction of relationships, and in the ability to literally provide an abstract model or machine for future practice.
The LEAG Prize allowed us to meaningfully advance a line of design inquiry that drives our practice through a built work. Today, we continue to expand upon when models are systems. Here you can see in the image Departamento del Distrito's first outdoor installation in the United States, which is opening this summer. This outdoor public installation is very much conceptualized as an expanded version, or V2, of our work for the LEAG Prize. The project consists of 2 photovoltaic space frames that float over the Craft Contemporary Courtyard in Los Angeles, right across from LACMA, creating a zone of performance, encounter, and cooling that attends to disciplinary questions of infrastructure and aesthetics, urban policy, and community energy provision. At its core, the project is driven by our research on resource management, or the ability for a specific population, be it a nation, regional collective, or local group, to control the ways that food, water, and energy are secured and administered. Many of our projects search for alternative spatial, material, and social practices that push for new forms of political legitimacy and forms of collectivity.
Last slide. Related to this research and deployed at a much larger scale is our recent work for the Mexican federal government in the municipality of Tultitlan. In 2019, part of the backstory is that the Mexican federal government began an ambitious plan called the Urban Improvement Program. With the aim of developing public works in underserved communities throughout the country, this government program has initiated approximately 1,000 projects in 27 states in just over 4 years. As part of this federal program, our office was involved in the development of 5 different public projects, all in the same municipality, working in collaboration with HOU, which is a landscape and urbanism office, Ricardo Garcia Santander, and Taller Architects, who are based in Colombia. The project pictured here is the House of Culture, Real de Bosque, a 3,400 square meter public cultural center. Sited on the foothills of the Sierra de Guadalupe mountain range, the project functions as both cultural infrastructure for the local community and as an access point to the Mountain State Park. Due to its elevated site position, the project overlooks the municipality's industrial landscape, which influenced the material palette that we used, with a clear view to the Mexico-Querétaro Federal Highway that connects the center of the country north to the US border. Urbanistically, the public space of the sidewalk is expanded through a series of steps and terraced platforms that welcome visitors, acting simultaneously as a hangout spot and project entrance. An amphitheater sits at the hinge point of the project of the 2 bars and functions as a central meeting place for the small library, gallery, cafe, dance studio, and children's art space on site. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Isaac Stein.
And I'm Maggie Sang, and we're co-founders of Department, or your second department today. So we are a landscape architecture and urban design studio based in Houston. We won the LEAG Prize in 2022 with the theme of grounding. the theme of grounding. And we were working on a number of different small projects at the time. I think we were founded in 2020, and at the time it was just the two of us.
Yeah, so these are what we were doing before we won the League Prize. So we, on the top right, we did a pile of sand at the Radcliffe Institute at Harvard. We just finished a boutique motel courtyard in the bottom left. We just completed a stormwater park from a competition run by the Van Allen Institute, and we were in the early stages of an experimental garden here on Rice's campus. And so, as Maggie alluded to, it was just the two of us when we won the award, and so things have changed a little bit in the past couple of years. We've grown both in people and in projects, and we're a large group of 5 people in the past couple.
So we've only had a couple of years to develop things that we're showing you today, but the League Prize really allowed us, as some folks have said already, to really focus on what our goals were as a small firm and a small practice, what our values were, and the types of projects that we wanted to work on. And the theme of grounding, I think, was really essential for us because it allowed us to really enter into this thinking about what landscape architecture means to us and the role of ecology in design practice. And so we were testing that a lot through small installations and temporary things, but the League Prize really allowed us to transition into much larger projects. And so we won the League Prize at the same time, that around like a year when we moved to Houston. And so we've become much more settled in the city, and we've been working across the Gulf Coast, both in Texas as well as in Florida. And we've been working on a range of much larger projects now, including a 50-acre ecological restoration project in Central Florida, as well as some public streetscape projects here in Montrose, in Houston. And one of the projects that we've been working on, some of you guys saw on the tour on Thursday morning, is with Buffalo Bayou Partnership. So it's part of a larger master plan for the east side of Buffalo Bayou that is a kind of repurposing of a lot of historic industrial sites. And this is just an image of, a rendering image of the Gravel Silos Park, which is about a 5-acre park.
So it's been a couple of years, and I think, landscapes projects take a while, and landscape projects take even longer. And so we're very excited. We're in the CD and CA phase for a lot of our larger projects that came out of winning the League Prize, including, this is sort of the other side of that rendering that you saw of a little gravel garden that we're working on with Buffalo Bayou Partnership, a big park conservancy in town, and reusing a lot of the materials from what is a historic building in Houston, even though it's only 50 years old, and entering CDs and permitting and construction for a lot of our projects. So we look forward to finishing those up in the next year or two and seeing the benefits of the recognition that comes from the League Prize. I went one. I was thinking there's more slides,
I guess we were brief, which is good. So yeah, we're looking forward to a lot of these things actually coming to fruition, and so we'll have more to show you next time around when we get emerging voices, right?
Yeah. Following Carlos.
But we're really happy to be part of this amazing group of people. We're on the younger side of things, and so we're really continuing to build our practice and think about what this means for us in the coming years. And we continue to be really dedicated and committed to working at the intersection of landscape, urbanism, ecology, and infrastructure. So thank you.
Hi, Francois de Manil. Thank you for inviting me to this. So being selected as one of the League's emerging voices has been one of the great honors of my architectural career. Without a doubt, it has increased our potential to be considered for many projects. Tonight, I'm presenting 3 works, 2 from before the emerging voices and 1 from after. So the Warp and the Weft, the Bottega Veneta shops. Using the brand's iconic woven leather bags as conceptual springboard, we threaded the shop's architectural elements through each other to create weavings of the product line and spatial weavings of the sales and stock areas. These interrelationships force the eye to continuously move through the shop, seeking the spaces hinted at beyond. This strategy allows smaller shops to appear and feel more spacious. The architecture frames the merchandise and restructures the relationship between the object and the viewer shopper. The experience is ritualized in stages of increasing contact with the merchandise. The lit recesses create discrete display environments that redefine each piece of merchandise as an idealized object of special value. A request to see specific piece reveals its full range of colors and sizes in adjacent storage areas. Having selected one for further examination, a pull-out shelf provides surface for appreciating the feel of the material and the quality of the construction. Through this experience, the object is transformed from an idealized abstraction to a personal possession. An inversion of body and soul, the Byzantine fresco chapel. Through a historic loan agreement with the Church of Cyprus, the client rescued and restored these 38 fresco fragments taken from a small devotional chapel in Lisi, Cyprus. The client further agreed to restore spiritual significance to the two 13th century frescoes by building a consecrated chapel for their display in Houston, Texas. The transposition of the ancient relics to the contemporary site is accomplished through a mediating external building with an embedded steel structure, a reliquary box. The relocation of the sacred works is represented through an inversion. The ethereal soul is solidified and become opaque in the restored frescoes, and the material solidity of the original chapel is shattered and made ephemeral through the fragmented freestanding glass structure. The immaterial materiality of the infill glass panels intensifies the absence-presence of the original site and transforms the glass structure into an apparition, shifting as one moves through it. A mutually supportive union, the Seneca Art and Culture Center, a 17,000 square foot visitor center devoted to the history and culture of the Seneca people. The center is located on the Ganondagan State Historic Site in Victor, New York. The Longhouse symbolizes the culture and values of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, formed when 5 warring nations came together in a mutually supportive union, agreeing to live together peacefully under an imaginary longhouse, stretching from the home of the Seneca in the west to the home of the Mohawk in the east. The union is depicted in the Hiawatha Wampum Belt, its white horizontal line metaphorically connecting the 5 nations and extending infinitely in both directions. The center is conceived as a rectangular structure with major east-west circulation axis similar to that of a traditional longhouse. The entry hall intersects this spine and acts as the building's core and bridges the southern wooded entry route with the northern landscaped path that leads visitors up to the longhouse. The approach sequence derives from the traditional Seneca rite of passage known as the Wood's Edge, where a visitor undergoes a ritual purification in preparation for and prior to entering the village. The meandering wooded approach, as well as fire and water elements in the open entry plaza, symbolically represent this cleansing ritual. This orchestration of building and landscape allows the building to serve as a threshold element along the visitor's path from the site entry to the longhouse. The historic site and Seneca culture are discovered by and through the building. Thanks.
Hello, I am Gail Peter Borden. I'm principal of Borden Partnership and a faculty member and director of graduate studies at the University of Houston, but I'm also a proud alumni of Rice, so my DNA is all over the place in Houston. As serendipity would have it, this is also the midpoint of tonight's presentation, but my award also, I think, kind of came at the midpoint arc of the Architecture League's award series. And so for me, that was a very important moment that coincided also with a fantastic artist in residency at the Chinati Foundation and Donald Judd's foundation in Marfa. So that summer was a kind of moment of self-reflection in both the kind of architectural work as well as kind of personal thinking, really about two themes. These are images from what was at the Architecture League in 2004. Interests really came out of an idea of materiality, what we make things out of, and then the tools and processes by which we work those materials to begin to derive form. And then also ideas of suburban landscapes and the kind of single-family house as a uniquely American building typology, which came out of a very strong sensibility of being born in a suburban landscape, raised in a suburban landscape, educated under the kind of Lars Larup era of Rice, which was deeply engaged with that, and a belief and understanding that that would become a kind of companion typology in our practice and examination. Our practice has been multifaceted. It has a kind of conventional built works, which are kind of client-based, and we've done a fair amount of kind of experimental works, which are more installation-based, books and publication through drawing and kind of reflective examinations of how materiality has had resonance in architecture throughout time, but establishing very diverse themes and ways of thinking at different eras in the discipline's evolution. For me, the League was a very important moment. It was an assertion that design could be scholarship, which should be something that I think we should all agree upon, but is ironically not something I think that is always typical in a place. Contemporary practice really still maintains a lot of the same themes. Again, looking at what the single-family house can do, and right now I just co-curated an exhibition at the University of Houston, which is housing still housing? 12 firms in town, or 12 firms, international firms, each did a single-family house, which will be up through mid-April. I encourage you to come by. But also projects in the upper right, we're doing for an outdoor classroom for St. Catherine's Montessori School, which the steel is up on Jaffet Creek along our kind of bayou infrastructure. And again, installation and or exhibition work, which still tries to challenge and interrogate the opportunities of material and making to both derive form, but also inflect upon experience. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Gary Cunningham, or people call me Corky, and it's an honor to be with this group. And as perhaps the only voice to emerge from Dallas, I'm compelled to make the comment that institutions like Rice, U of H, UT Austin, and now Texas Tech are so critical to the development and evolution of a city. I just hope that my city one day connects those dots. You know, in the early 1990s, when I received this award, I was not aware that this group existed, because I was in this cultural black hole. And certainly it caused me to rise a little bit to the occasion. And you know, as a small office back then, and still a small office, and as a traditional old school firm, that David would say, you know, we look for clients that need things built, that want to pursue a conversation that's more than budget, schedule, and aesthetics. And you know, and we've been lucky to have clients like the far left, which is a theater and community center in the town of Addison, a small suburban Dallas, or the conversion of a 1923 Dallas Power and Light substation to a home, or a design and construction of a chapel for a group of Hungarian monks, Cistercian monks living in Irving, Texas. Again, being a small firm, in fact, during the chapel project, I had to fire my one employee, Russ Buchanan, because I ran out of money. But luckily, the next day, he went to work as a carpenter on the job and got a raise. So, you know, that's all right. You know, since that 30 years, we continue to try to find clients that want to engage us. And, you know, when we do like complex, difficult clients, this is one that is a synagogue in Dallas, and it is a historical building done by Howard Meyer in 1957, and tremendous honor to work on this project, you know, with, you know, 400 or 500 clients, which I love doing. It's just a lot of fun. But, you know, dealing with existing kind of aesthetic and cultural place and trying to expand that and help bring this institution to present day by engaging young people and their whole community. The other project I wanted to show is a project for our hippie client, Half Price Books. And this is, you know, a dumb office building, which started out with really no sense of place. We were given a parking lot as our site. So as someone that loves nature and site and place, this was, you know, this was a challenge. And this project, you know, began before COVID, and the idea that, you know, let's put the public spaces and circulation outside the enclosed, conditioned office space was not my idea. I wish I could have claimed it, but it was my crazy client, Sharon Boots Anderson, who said, I want a building that pulls people outside and causes them to engage with nature. And again, in a parking lot, you know, you have to deal with shadow and light. And it was fun working with these materials that are acetified wood that will never be painted and it weathers on its own, and use it to shade different orientations of the building. And even take hot dip galvanized perforated metal and see what the galvanizing dip does to the density of the actual material. But, you know, and I'd like to imagine this building in, you know, in 20 years during the apocalypse when people are living on the walkways outside and, you know, and unscrewing with the screw gun, you can take apart the screen and reconfigure it. You can build a shed out of it. I hope that it does evolve into that, because I do like buildings that age and patina and take on their own life. Thank y'all.
Well, good evening. I'm Ryan Jones. I'm a partner with Lake Flato Architects. It's an honor to be in this group and share this audience with some great mentors who have inspired inspired me throughout the years, and in some cases educated me in the 20 years since my time here at Rice University. Whenever David Lake and Ted Flater were honored with the Architecture League Prize in 1991, our firm was 7 years old. We were an office of about 7 people. All of our work was in Texas, and I was in 7th grade. And inspired, I was inspired to be a veterinarian at the time. But David and Ted, on the heels of postmodernism, were designing ranch houses that were contextually modern and authentic to their place. Our firm values were being shaped in the natural environment of West Texas, where the climate demands collaboration, a place where, you know, the buildings and landscape merge, where the use of regional materials and construction techniques cultivate a pragmatic approach to craft, where vernacular heritage and ingenuity gave form to ranching culture. And I often wonder kind of what our work and our values would look like if our work had started with urban dwellings instead of rural dwellings. Today, our firm of over 150 people applies those same values across North America and in 7 different countries. And what we like to say is that our values travel with us. And we welcome any of you to come visit us in San Antonio or Austin. Our design values enable our architecture to evolve from its context, resulting in a visually diverse portfolio that is authentic to the places where we work, but uniquely Lake Flato at the same time. Our office serves 10 different market sectors and scales varying from open-air pavilions, such as Confluence Park, to large-scale urban districts, such as Pearl Brewery, here on the top left. On the small scale, we do visitor centers that are really educating people about sustainable design practices and construction practices. But we also work on really kind of complex, high-performance lab buildings that have a direct, measurable impact on our natural environment. Lake Flato has been honored with 16 AIA Coat Top 10 awards, more than any other practice in our profession. David and Ted were recently honored this past year with the AIA Gold Medal. But after 40 years, it is the resiliency and impact of our core values and culture that we believe is our greatest accomplishment. As we look to the next 40 years, we have no intention of slowing our growth. Rather, we look to maximize our impact in the world. We will continue to push toward a sustainable relationship with our natural environment and are actively expanding our expertise and immediate need for embodied carbon and carbon reductions through expertise in material science and mass timber. We look to expand our involvement in mission-critical and social equity projects across the country, and we will continue to look in the mirror. As one of the profession's few certified B Corps, Lake Flato is committed to measuring our social and environmental impact with a focus on supporting an inclusive, equitable, and regenerative economy. And unfortunately, we are one of too few firms who are reporting to the 2030 challenge objectives. When I was a student here at Rice, Lars Larup stood up over in front of that wall right over there and called on all of us and told us that architecture must move, that we must move beyond the highbrow nature of the work of our work and address larger social and environmental issues of the day. As I look to the growth of Lake Flato in years to come, I'm inspired by the belief that our values enable and in fact encourage us to move, that we continue to expand the places where we have a lasting impact on the human experience, where we can enrich community and nurture the natural environment. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm Mark Womble with Interloop Architecture. In his article for Art Forum published in October of 1991, Herbert Muschamp declares, "Paper architecture is dead." He compares paper architecture to junk bonds, referencing Michael Milken and the overvalued paper notes of the 1980s meant to attract would-be investors to sub-investment grade companies. Muschamp singles out John Haydock for allowing a controversial Third Avenue dormitory for Cooper Union to move forward, saying his head should be on a pike, which I thought was harsh. In 1991, that was also the year that I moved to Houston to teach here at the School of Architecture at Rice. And to start Interloop, a teach-practice hybrid. With the teach-practice model, teaching allowed me to pursue research interests at Rice while practice organized around disciplinary literacy and content to shape the design process in the office at Interloop. Teaching was about exploring interest in conducting research. Practice was about organizing work so that research could enter the content. With the desire to practice but no proposals for work, we reverted to a version of paper architecture. And we produced Texas Ice House, which is in the center of the image on the screen now. As paper architecture, however, it was not our intent to pursue radical or necessarily utopian or even fantastical architectures, nor was it a polemical position. Instead, this was a hypothetical undertaking served as a stand-in or a kind of a paper proxy to allow other aspects of the design process at Interloop to evolve. Texas Ice House also allowed me to better understand the history and the culture of South Texas, which was new to me. My submission for the League Prize in 1995 featured Texas Ice House. The recognition we received from the Architecture League galvanized aspects of our design approach and the usefulness of paper proxies as an element of our process at Interloop. With Texas Ice House, the right-of-ways, setbacks, easements, and building envelopes that separate conventional public and private domains are collapsed into a single undulating line, creating new fronts and backs, flattened urban hierarchies, and recombinations of program. Similar themes are explored in the learning spaces at Gardner-Simon's Teaching Laboratory on the left, and with engineering manufacturing workflows with Houston Products Lab exhibited as part of the Aluminum and Architecture Show at the Carnegie Museum on the right. Roughly 15 years later, an unbuilt competition entry in 2 commissioned designs by Interloop Architecture with my co-founder, Dawn Finley, open transfer on the left, a central station transfer zone for Houston's light rail system, where 3 converging train lines intersect by expanding the architecture of the platform to intermittently mark and envelop the space of the street. And with the Hempstead Research Center in 2010, a small private garden and conservation foundation expands to include an adjacent property and constructs a new facility to propagate and preserve seed material and display new plant varieties via a series of curated threshold courtyards. And J-Camp at the bottom, a year-round campground on Lake Texoma, Texas, where a malleable wood frame type emerges from simple alterations of roof lines, footprints, and a graphic rain screen. 2 built projects in a commercially available made-to-order product. Tending Blue on the left, 2003, a James Turrell artwork for the National Sculpture Center where careful detailing and a new lighting technology by the architect, us in this case, allowed for the architect's vision to be for the artist's vision to be realized. 9 Degree House in the center, where in addition to an historically significant house, utilizes a skewed plan and resulting parallax view to announce the threshold between new and old. And EXIT 2013, remnants from the destructive testing phase at Underwriter Laboratories for a made-to-order UL-listed exit sign designed by Interloop Architecture and manufactured in Houston and installed in over 220 buildings across the US and abroad. Thank you.
So 3 very auspicious things happened to me in the mid-1980s. First, I was invited to be in Emerging Voices, and I went to New York, and a little kid from Texas gave a lecture there, and that was really a very, very big deal for me. Second, John Morris Dixon, who was the editor of Progressive Architecture, which was the leading architectural journal of the time, also in New York, called me up and said, I want to come down to Texas and I want to see some of the work you've done firsthand. Holy shit. Would that ever happen today that an editor would want to go down and actually experience the architecture before they decided to publish it? No photos, just come see. I only had 2 projects at the time, a ranch house out in the hill country and a little apartment building in Austin. We walked around those. He went back to New York, called me back and said, I want to publish both of them in a little section of the magazine called Texas Commentary, and the ranch house was on the cover. That's the second auspicious thing. The third auspicious thing was this guy knocked on my door of my office one day. His name was Clarence Roy. He was named principal of Johnson, Johnson & Roy Landscape Architects in Detroit, Ann Arbor, actually. They had been the landscape architects for Mies van der Rohe for many projects, in particular Lafayette Park, the still incredibly beautiful housing project in central Detroit. Clarence Roy had seen a notice for an RFP for a planning project in Austin. It was going to be the largest planning project ever done in Austin. He was interested in pursuing that, and he came down to scope the thing out and try to find a local partner. He just knocked on my door one day, and we had a 4-hour conversation that afternoon. I told him I had a big urban design interest. I'd spent 3 years when I was on the faculty at MIT working on a grant from the Grunsfeld Foundation, studying streets, in particular in high-density mixed-use environments in Paris and New York and Washington and Boston. So we had a great conversation, and we decided to partner and go after the project. We got it. That's it at the top. It was for a 7-mile area that included a whole central part of Austin and what is now Lady Bird Lake between Tom Miller Dam and Longhorn Dam. It included also the lower part of downtown, which was 5 blocks by 15 blocks and had been underdeveloped because it had been flood prone before the dam had been put in a few years before. We proposed for downtown a very, very high density residential mixed use environment. That was very, very weird at the time, but it complemented the office buildings that were in the rest of downtown. That project was followed by councils and mayors and the city for actually even up until recently. There's still some fragments of that plan being executed. I was fortunate to do 23 projects in the last X years in that district. We've done 4 projects for the Austin Convention Center, working on the 4th of them right now. We've done 3 projects for the Umlauf Sculpture Garden and Museum. We've done 4 high-density residential mixed-use projects. We've done 3 high-density office mixed-use projects. We've done 3 sub-master plans for other areas. What we love to do is do the master plan and then do buildings that execute that. And we've been fortunate to be able to do that over and over and over again, not just in this district, but around as well. That led me to a love of collaboration with landscape architects, and we've done that in many cities, in Austin, but other places. We did Discovery Green here in Houston with Hargrave and Jones, landscape architect, Buffalo Biopark with SWA landscape architects. And we enjoy very much still doing master plans. We've recently done them for Trinity University in San Antonio, for the Capitol Complex in downtown Austin, for the Dell Medical School in Austin, and with Sasaki on the UT master plan. It all came out of those 3 little auspicious events in the 1980s. Thank you.
This is DKO Seosari, and I'm Ryan Ballum. In 2021, when the ARC League recognized us as Emerging Voices, it was 15 years since we had started working together while we were at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. And at that time, we were just 3 people, and now we're generally somewhere 4 to 5 with the goal of staying small and being a lateral office where we're all working together as partners on projects. We were doing a range of work then, from building houses to master planning cities in West Africa, so it was a kind of a crazy difference across the scale.
And really, for us, this idea of aloneness as an idea and an ideal has been a driving force. And we started with the goal of trying to articulate that the principle of aloneness could be a response, or maybe a generative critique, if you will, to our view of architecture, of how it's made in society typically, which is heavy, expensive, exclusive, and energy intensive. And so we view design, or making design accessible and democratic, as something positive. And our goal was to focus on understanding the mechanics of design and delivery of architecture so that we could fine-tune and calibrate it.
So at that time, we were really demonstrating aloneness in practical terms. We were trying to make prototypes, and along with that, making a lot of mistakes, trying not to let those show up in the building, but defining our process. We're both trained as engineers, so we're using principles of engineering design, a standards-based approach to build products, from buildings, cities, landscape, furniture, equipment, digital tools, and then ultimately trying to make a process of what low design is and what it can be.
I think also in terms of the way that Emerging Voices was a sort of springboard for us was it also gave us a chance to sort of pause and reflect. And not only in terms of, let's say, other opportunities that came up, like for example, we did the second Ghana Pavilion at the Venice Biennale in 2022, the year after, which was just the second time that there was a pavilion after Adji Associates did the first one in 2019. So we had sort of opportunities, but we also found ourselves also trying to explain in a way more what we were doing. And so very much the stage we're at now is one of systematizing our process. And that's because we are interested in being able to share our approach. And so defining the process and the systems approach and integrating them enables us to move even further from co-design to co-production. So a lot of that is about making these systems legible and being able to share them so that other people can participate in not only open source architecture, but also open design platforms. I think also when we had our conversation at the time of the award, I think, Paul, you asked this question that, are we going to continue building and being design build as we move forward? So I think at this stage we've tried to double down on that. So now we have low design office, but also low design construction, because we see that our projects are getting larger and more complex, and so we recognize that we have to sort of make that investment in being able to participate in not only allowing architecture to be more adaptable and open to changes over time in participatory ways with communities, but also how we can use technologies like 3D printing and robotic construction to allow us to expedite the delivery of architecture and make it more open.
And I would add to that, I think the construction and making and fabricating side allows us to be a part of the process at all scales and is, I think, really foundational to a knowledge exchange from everyone involved in the process. And we can learn from them as much as they might learn from us, and I think that's what we believe in as a process.
Thank you so much. Rob Rogers. Actually won the Emerging Voices in 2001 as Rogers Marvel Architects. Doing a lot of residences, interiors, beginning to get some larger scale institutional projects, pursuing public realm. And a lot of the investigation was actually through things like the invited competition for the I-Beam Atelier. We're really trying to continue to be investigative and exploratory and experimental, but thinking rigorously about building systems, envelopes, structures, New York City zoning envelopes, the kind of beginning to insert the reality. And I think that one of the things that the Emerging Voices lecture did was helped us start thinking about how to present the work strategically and procedurally and to different audiences in ways that begin to let you cross over a practice from clients of personal relationships to clients that are institutional relationships, mission-driven, understanding a bigger picture. And so since 2013, practicing as Rogers partners, we've really been working in that realm, trying to pursue those kinds of projects. You may be familiar with the building that we did here on the Rice campus. This is the Madison Square Boys and Girls Club in Harlem, which is a deeply community-dedicated, program-rich exercise in trying to deliver community resources into an underserved community that comes on. And I'd have to, it's been fun, and that transition has been terrific, sort of gaining the confidence of a maturity of practice in the institutional realm. And so I have started to think beyond that now, and some of you may be familiar with this too, but this is the Galveston Bay Park project. We're delighted to be partnering with the Speed Center here at Rice University, with Walter P. Moore, with political partners, with economic advisors. And this is for hurricane surge protection for Houston, the western part of Galveston Bay, the ship channel, the port. We're challenging the Army Corps with what surge mitigation is really all about. And I'm delighting in a role as the architect, really as the aggregator of thinking, of expertise, of experimenters, of politicians, lobbyists, and understanding that you know, growing a practice through understanding form, program, conditions, and systems can also evolve into a practice trying to understand how we really do take on the problems that are at the scale of the world right now, and what do we bring together as a practice in terms of thought leaders and practitioners to try and truly challenge those. So the project builds a series of an archipelago of islands in Galveston Bay that provides surge protection for Houston, but it serves as a parkscape. It actually provides ecological restoration and environmental remediation, and is what we imagine as infrastructure of the 21st century. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Scott Specht of, I should forward this, Specht Novak Architects, which at the time we won this award was Specht Harpman. So I'll give a shout out to Louise Hartman, who was my partner at the time and responsible for a lot of this. She's at NYU now. And so we won this in 2002, which was the very end of the dot-com era. And if you're under 50, you can Google that, what that was. But we did, we were known for doing fast, cheap, and out-of-control offices during that time. We really made it a point to, you know, find things that weren't typical architectural materials, like Rubbermaid ice cube trays and cardboard cartons and ice, you know, water bottles and so forth. We also, you know, got all of these because we were cheap. That center office there was done for $25 a square foot, which back in 2002 even was incredibly cheap. It was all done of shelves that were found at a local place that recycled shelves from industrial places that were closing. So it was interesting. We won this award right at the end of that period when it was all starting to fall apart. And coincidentally, it was an inflection point for our practice because this kind of stuff doesn't translate to when you're doing somebody's house. Nobody wants a wall of Rubbermaid ice cube trays. So we really did change our process quite a bit and started doing things that were more timeless, had more, you know, lasting value, I think, and were less, you know, trend oriented. And so this is some of our more current work that we're moving towards. And the one thing that's the through line between the two is I was trained at University of Florida by a professor who was an acolyte of Mies, and it was beaten into us that we had to express reveals and differences, but changes between materials. So that level of detailing was the same whether it was an ice cube tray or, you know, brick and concrete, as you see here. By the way, that left house was built by Sebastian Construction, one of the sponsors. Shout out to Sebastian here. But even though we're doing much larger work now, we still find ways to work in this experimental process into what we do. We do paper projects quite a bit, and there's not really an organized system for this. It's when we come up with a cool idea, we just kind of pursue it. But it works its way into some projects. Like on the upper left is the Carpenter Hotel in Austin, where we found used oil drill platform pipe and used it as a screen wall for a garage, and this clay tile from a 125-year-old clay plant in Texas that made all these different and unusual shapes. The one I'm most proud of right now is lower left. It's my new house I just moved into with my wife, and it has no exterior windows at all. It's got 2 interior courtyards, and it was really putting your money where your mouth is, because I thought this could turn out to be horrible, you know, be enclosed, and put a lot of money into it doing that, and it ended up being a great place to live. So it's fun to have something burbling in your mind for a very long time, and then finally get to actually live in it. For the emerging voices, when it came along, it's hard to say, you know, it's a lot of times hard to say what exact impact that had on our firm. But it does, I think, you know, I remember the first time we got published, it was in an interior design magazine, and when it came out, we were so excited we bought 50 copies, and they're still in a box on a shelf. I don't know who we thought might want these things, but it was the same kind of excitement, and it really does give you a lot of confidence to win something like this. You know, you feel like architecture goes up and down, and you know, you get points when you don't have much work coming in, and it gives you that kind of feeling like, okay, I'm going to stick with this, and it has. So very grateful to win this, and thank you very much.
Okay, almost there. All right. So I was giving a talk at the university at San Luis Potosí a couple years ago, and I was really killing it, actually. Even though it was through simultaneous translation, my jokes were like landing, images, ideas, it was all coming together. But in the front rows, it was occupied, not unlike some of our talks, by the kind of wise old-timers that clearly were going to get to ask the first questions. And after presenting all my ideas and kind of all my thinking, the first question quickly came through the translator. It was translated basically, "You lose so many competitions. Have you ever asked yourself if you're doing something fundamentally wrong?" And so I guess I also should say, before I go into this, anybody that's known me for 5 minutes knows that I love being an architect. Anybody that's known me for 5 minutes knows I'm always thinking about the future and not really necessarily awards that we've received in the past. But I really leaned into thinking about what this award might mean, a kind of win among many losses. And also Elise is here, and I was thinking about our friend Jeffrey Brown, who passed, and how he used to tell me how much he loved seeing all the different ways architects form and formulate their practices, and how different and kind of unique we all are in developing our voices. But I think despite that, one thing I would say we all share is some kind of lopsided ratio between our wins and losses, and that our wins don't come as often as our losses. So at the time that Rosalind and I, my partner in Shamshe, were winning this award, we had just completed about 10 years of collaboration that began with, by chance, in the depths of the Great Recession. We had lost probably 7 competitions, working together sometimes with friends like Chris Leong and Albert Pope. And we really only scored 1 win, which was an invitation from David Chipperfield to the Venice Biennale for a project we had developed in collaboration with Team and Katie Newell. A couple of our successes were the recently completed TransArt Foundation, which you can see on the left, which we visited yesterday, and the locally owned White Oak Music Hall. And on our 3rd nomination, so we had submitted twice already, we were accepted to participate in the now defunct Young Architects program at PS1 MoMA, and summarily lost. Okay. And so this track of winning, sometimes winning, but mostly losing, I think is an important part of the story of a program like this, and the way that it offers encouragement to all of us as architects as we move through careers. We actually applied for the League Prize 3 times and lost. We also previously applied and were nominated to Emerging Voices twice before we were selected in the year 2019. My point in listing all these kind of failed attempts is to really point out that it only actually takes a few successes to propel a career and to really make a practice. And those little successes sometimes propel and take your career in unexpected ways. So it's really hard to point to one factor, but certainly it's helped build our relationships globally and given us many friends and mentors and peers in the league and through our relationships with the league. And we've simultaneously, through those kind of global relationships, we've also engaged deeply with our sites of practice. We won a competition for an installation, which you can see on the right, over a street in downtown Houston, but ultimately struggled to convince the capital partners of the developer to fund its construction. Simple projects like the little commercial building seem to emerge kind of effortlessly somehow. And then this little recently finished house in Virginia developed because of a long and sustained friendship with the couple that lives in it. And then lately we've begun to build on the reputation of some of the earlier work. It allows us to take bigger stages and opportunities for success and failure. Our work in Marfa, which is not pictured for rights issues, has led us to doing work on other sites of cultural and ecological precarity, like the Houston Audubon High Island Visitor Center, Canopy Walk and Field Station with SWA, the cafe at the Running Trail Center in Memorial Park with MBW that we saw the other day at lunch. And lastly, I included, which is, Kevin's here probably, which is our first major inclusion in an international competition for the Houston Endowment Headquarters, which we also summarily lost to our friend and respected colleague, Kevin Daly and Productura, but allowed us to work with Andrea Cochran, HKS, and other really high-level collaborators and high-level ideas. And so I just wanted to present the kind of significance of an award like this and inclusion in a group like this as a great honor and success among many, many challenges and diversions that your career takes you through, and thank the League for including us. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Danny Samuels, by the way. No pressure being last, of course, in this illustrious group. So this is an hour lecture in 5 minutes. Our work is the result of a unique collaboration, initially of the three of us, Danny, Bob, and I, who founded Taft in 1973, and later, after Bob's departure in 1995, just the two of us here. Our working process is based on our shared undergraduate experience at Rice in the late 60s and the diverse apprenticeships we had after. In addition to the influence of the many visitors to Rice, like Bob Venturi, Denise Scott Brown, Cedric Price, and Louis Kahn, two of our teachers stand out. First, Eleanor Evans, a protege of Joseph Albers, provided us with an abstract process for exploring 2- and 3-dimensional visual structures, and then Paul Kennan, who had worked for Eero Saarinen, instilled in us what we would call the Saarinen tradition, with an emphasis on making rational decisions within a coherent conceptual framework, and finding within the problem itself the origins of its resolution. This foundation was enhanced by the very diverse individual experiences after Rice. Danny, who had interned with Kevin Roach, went to Paris to work for Guillermo Julian on Le Corbusier's unfinished Venice Hospital. Bob to New York as an assistant to Peter Eisenman at the Institute in its earliest days, and then later IMP. And I went to Los Angeles to work for Caesar Pelli at Gruen's, and later Craig Hodgetts. From these experiences, we developed a belief that clear, abstract ordering systems can sustain, accommodate, and become enriched by detailed development. Physical models at various scales are an important aspect of this process. Our selection in Bob Stern's 1977 40 Under 40 led to several important exhibits, like George Rinaldi's Young Architects at Yale and Andrew McNair's New Americans in Rome. Our 1980 PA Design Award was the impetus for our inclusion in the US exhibit at the first International Architecture Biennale in Venice, and this was in 1980. In many ways, the 1982 Emerging Voices was the culmination of these events, coming at a time when our commissions were getting larger in scale and our practice becoming more firmly established. The coda to this phase was the 1985 Rome Prize, which had never been awarded to a trio before, and which gave us the opportunity to reflect on our work and bring new insights to our trajectory.
So as three designers from a common background, but with diverse experiences and very different ideas, we had to find ways to work together because we thought that it was important for all of us to work together on every project. So sitting around the table, common piece of paper, or maybe pieces of cardboard and scissors, we had to find ways to agree on design directions, and what we eventually evolved were these kind of diagrammatic approaches that talked about the spatial organization of the schemes. So on this one and the next one, you see diagrams of 35 Taft projects over 50 years. The first group are relatively simple approaches, centralized spaces, planar spaces, organizations found relative to an edge or a path. At the Emerging Voices presentation in 1982, we showed, first of all, the Talbot House, a little tiny house in the Caribbean. It was a central pavilion with 4 towers around it and very much a Caribbean flair. At the very same time, we were working on the much larger Rivercrest Country Club in Fort Worth for the landmen and landwomen of Fort Worth. Basically the same diagram, but very different expressions. Centralized, planar expressions, but what we've been working on since, the kind of breakthrough project was the YWCA, a planar organization as a threshold to a space beyond, with various components of the program arranged around it, and then the bayou landscape beyond that. And the projects we've worked on since then, for the most part, are these kind of more complex organizations. A series of schools that we did between 1992 and 2008, of more public spaces with groupings of program around them, almost as little towns, and with plazas and pathways and discrete buildings within the scheme. That attitude continues with our current projects, which are affordable communities in a variety of natural settings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all for those amazing presentations. It's a intergenerational whirlwind, and it was fantastic. We are going to turn off the projector and invite our award winners to join us in the front of the audience over here for a Q&A that Anne and I will moderate. Okay, so we'll probably have a time for a couple of questions only, but a good way to extend the conversation and touch on some of the topics that were presented here. As Anne and I were looking at all of your amazing submissions, there were a number of threads that came through in terms of how not only the types of awards have evolved, but also the works of architects over the last few years, or maybe decades in case of some of you. And one aspect that became really interesting to us was how in many of your practices you worked with institutions and organizations, and in some cases art institutions, foundations, museums, and galleries, over sometimes an extended period of time. And one thing that we were wondering about is how has that work with institutions and organizations and art organizations has influenced your practice? How did it change the practice in your office by working with these organizations over a period of time? And we are thinking of the work of Gary Cunningham, Françoise de Menil, Troy Schaum, and maybe you can elaborate on that particular link as well. We have mics in the front, and we are happy to share if you raise your hand. Go for it, Danny.
That on?
Yes.
Working with either nonprofit organizations or for-profit organizations over extended periods of time, you find that they change constantly. Nothing is ever the same. If a client tells you that they want this kitchen, and another chef comes in 2 years later, then the kitchen is obsolete. So you have to be looking ahead to how do you accommodate constant evolutionary change, or some organizations just disappear.
Stephen or Troy, maybe?
We do a lot of work with DIA Art Foundation, or Mellon Foundation as well. And though, like architects themselves, the mission of those organizations change over time. And so I think there's a couple different things from working on these long relationships and what we learn from that. One, I mean, it's always inspiring working for them, but seeing how they change and how they engage the world and how they engage sometimes the good or sometimes the terrible things going around us, I think teaches us how to engage. You know, they're inspiring clients and inspiring people, so it's a real learning process. That's one of the reasons we love working for clients like that.
Thank you.
I was thinking, you know, we work from a range of clients, from the Chinati Foundation and Judd Foundation to commercial groups like Midway and Redome Capital in Houston. And it's funny because I think a lot of the ethos and energy that is in some of the better commercial enterprises actually is something that the arts organizations seem to want to learn from. I mean, we were talking about the Manils property, for instance, the other day, and how much they're actually commercial developers with, as an institution, with all the property they own in that surrounding neighborhood. And at the same time, so they're interested in how they, you know, use commercial levers and commercial mechanisms to actually create place, especially in a city like Houston. In Buffalo Bayou Partnership, we saw the same kind of questions emerging. At the same time, you know, the arts organizations, they do, I think it's a question of time and reflection and space that they create to actually consider things, right? They move a lot slower and a lot more deliberately than the commercial organizations. And so I think the commercial organizations are always trying to learn from the arts organizations how to be deliberate about placemaking, how to be deliberate about culture, how to be deliberate about inclusivity. And so I think it's really interesting to actually move back and forth between the two types of organizations and understand how it's more of a broader evolving consciousness about publicness and placemaking and how we take care of our communities.
We've been debating which of these questions to ask you because we like them all. So we're hopping around a little bit. I think we're just going to talk about art education in campus, and we're rolling in campus into both university campuses as well as places of faith. And since we're here on a university campus, how has your design work contributed to both the field of architecture as well as to building educational institutions or institutions as a whole? And I would add to that this unique opportunity in the academical village of cross-disciplinary work. So could some of you talk about the kind of work that being affiliated within a university has allowed you to do, and any kind of fostering of working together, working collaboratively that has done?
I think, you know, being an educator and practitioner is a very valuable synergy. Thinking about, you know, how connecting students to practice and how to think of ways to bring the city interest in not only the layers of architecture, but urban design and landscape and, you know, all these other dynamics. I think that's always been part of our interest. And how do we make the city, you know, a space to imagine collectively? So, you know, I've been an educator since the start of the practice, probably as having that space for thinking. Because once you're practicing with clients, it's like very that becomes a luxury. But yeah, I wonder, you know, how for others that also has an impact.
So since we're on the Rice campus and Rice building and Rice architecture, thinking about the collaboration between campus and design and where it is, the kind of the remarkable privilege to design a building on a campus of which you're an alumni is amazing. But I'd also like to say that there were 4 other Rice grads on that team, and they were all very different generations, from a preceptor up to myself, to Bob Heinches as a curtain wall consultant, who I believe was a classmate of Danny and John. And one class behind, sorry, it was you're slightly behind. But the amazing thing of that particular campus environment was that we each had very specific memories about the campus, its conditions, its criteria, how it informed us and how it affected us, and that was all gathered together in that response. And that's everything from what is the character of an outdoor space to ideas of materiality to, you know, intimacy to collective behavior to all those kind of things. And I am not normal the social behaviorist of architects. We have some here, but you know, I think we couldn't help but apply that kind of deeply personal knowledge, and it's quite different than going into a campus where you have to use the rigor of analysis and exploration and investigation of a site unknown. And we've done that too, but this was really a particular circumstance. And when I feel like it's right, I feel like the building fits, and it's a Rice building, and that's a very specific kind of thing. And so it's sort of, I'll let others speak to working on campus environments broadly, but since we're here, I couldn't help but cover that one. Thank you.
I'll just, oh, sorry. I have a mic.
Maggie and then Carlos. Yeah.
Just going to see chat. I'll just expand on what Paulo was saying earlier, just about maybe less on the experience of working as a practitioner on a campus, but as the role of academia and practice related to one another, and beyond just the student involvement, the opportunity to have grant-funded research and interdisciplinary collaboration among various departments on the university campus is so critical, especially when we're addressing issues such as climate change and ecological restoration and these broader topics that we know that we can't do just within the time frame of a single project. So I think that being on an academic campus or being in academia and having studio as well as larger research opportunities and grants to kind of collaborate with many other different types of departments, such as civil engineering or sociology, I think really gives and feeds our practice in a way that I think that projects client by client is just really limiting. So I think it's a really nourishing kind of relationship.
Yes, well, just to continue on the comments, I think one of the great opportunities of working with enlightened university at any level, whether public or private, is to have a sort of conglomerate of advocates that support and encourage the work. And I think I speak for myself in this situation working with Rice, with Raymond Brockstein, who was a tremendous advocate who fought for us to do a master plan and build the first two buildings of a new campus for Rice outside of the main campus. And I always remember how strong he was as a supporter of the collective. And by collective, I mean the university itself, the School of Architecture, and those that were representing the solution to that particular project. So absolutely, advocacy is fundamental.
Great. Thank you. And maybe to extend that conversation, I appreciate the fact that several of you have mentioned interdisciplinary collaborations and the knowledge that's being produced on campuses and universities is something that informs the practice. I was going to ask a question about research. Maybe as an academic, as an educator, for me, that's close to our hearts, what we do in schools, but I feel good firms do that as well, and there is a lot of exchange, and it's already pointing out towards Gail, Mark, and Ursula and Stephen over there, but we saw different threads in the presentations: housing, environment, ecology, community, but maybe elaborate a little bit more what constitutes research in your practice and how do you conduct it in the context of your own practice. We'll pass you the mic.
Well, thank you, Igor. That's such a complex question in a campus and an academic context. I think for us, research has meant to understand sort of the edges of the discipline. And as you know, our work is not squarely sort of disciplinary. And so the edges for us have been ways to engage with pedagogy. And it was a way to be able to speak to upper administration at the president's level to set up a research center in a way that the research seemed worthwhile to people who are interested in investing at the university level and not interested in the research content, but then how that trickles down to engaging students through, we have 8 to 10 students through paid internships. That work then trickles out into the studio. And so disciplinarily, I think our research has been able to kind of fluidly move from being ours in the way that we think about it to becoming our students' goals, and then to becoming their way of approaching studio. And so it feels like the ecology of disciplinary thinking from various positions makes the research in the way that we think about it. And so it's not necessarily about producing new knowledge, but it's about understanding methods through which either undergrads, grads, PhD students, ourselves, and then our interdisciplinary collaborations enter the research question through their own kind of framing. And that's kind of how, maybe this goes back to Anne's question, or also like we've been able to have a research center that is sort of our thinking, but sort of university priorities and strategic planning, but also student work, and they feel very invested, and then it becomes part of the research for the studio context as well. And so it's not a one thing, you know, it seems very porous for us.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly echo some of those. I mean, for me as a young faculty member joining a kind of large institution, the kind of utopian ideal of what the academy meant was quickly kind of educated by an understanding of, in fact, the kind of differentiation of disciplinary bodies of knowledge within a kind of organizational structure. And as a kind of tenure track faculty member, you're kind of constantly, I think, confronted with the idea of, you know, there's teaching in service and research, which is a term which now kind of becomes defined in a way of not applied knowledge, because that's practice, and somehow that's not recognized, I think, at the institutional level, versus new knowledge and what that begins to mean as a kind of investigative tool. I mean, for me, I think many of my roots came from this building where architecture was everything, and architecture was a simultaneity of thinking, which comes from, you know, origins of Bauhaus to, I think, much more sophisticated contemporary ideals of thinking holistically about sustainability and cultural implications, you know, pragmatics to philosophical. And so for me, what's intriguing to bring it back to the Architecture League is that that has always, I think, represented bodies of work which ride that line. There's an ambition for execution of work, but that work is intelligently challenging and leading the discipline, and by doing so, perhaps society.
I think Ryan and DK, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off of these comments. I think also because collaboration is at the core of our practice, but I think you might have picked this up. We also have a strange sort of transatlantic engagement from Texas and in Ghana, West Africa. And so I think for us, the sort of question of research, we also approach it through jointly participation and technology. So I mentioned before sort of open design and open source, and so we have a number of initiatives that we've incubated within the office, and increasingly we're sort of investing in sort of open source communities where essentially you can share essentially toolkits and libraries of design information with communities. And for us, that's specifically very, very lateral and vertically integrated communities. So that means basically working with people who have not gone to school and are working in the informal sector communities, largely in West Africa, but also increasingly other places, but having them work literally alongside, jointly, collaboratively in the development of technological systems, together with master's and PhD students in architecture and engineering, as well as the office and other collaborators. So I think for us, the more we can think even beyond institutions and organizations which are already formed to allow our architectural practices to support ecosystems that can allow even more people to engage, this allows us to broaden the impact of architecture.
Oh, I have one thing to add. You know, as a young practice, often we get the question, so like, what kind of work do you do? And it's a very difficult question to answer, and you go through all of these different things, but I think more recently how we're approaching the answer to that question is our connection to academia and our connection to research. And for us, of course, there are many different ways and forms that you can approach research through material, through typology, through archives. But I think at the base for us is that each syllabus, each course that we teach has a sort of thesis connected to it, an argument that we're testing, and the same thing for every project. There's a thesis, there's an argument embedded within it, and so for each thing, right, you're searching for a new type of knowledge and you're testing something. And then you're evaluating what's being tested, and then you're applying it in the next series of projects, slowly over time growing the project, which is the practice in that way. So for us, the connection to Rice and to academia in general, and Francisco teaches at Iberoamericana in Mexico City, for us has been completely fundamental, and we do not draw any distinction between, are we practitioners or are we teachers? It is all part of the same thing.
So I know we've beat the dead horse here, but it's all been Rice, 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 and I just want to give another perspective. At University of Texas, where I've taught forever, they recently changed the name of the Vice President for Research to the Vice President for Scholarship, Research, and Creative Work. And I'm not sure we as architects value creative work as much as a means of advancing our field as research. I'm all for research, but I think a fundamental way we advance our field is through creative work. And I love the fact that my university has acknowledged right up there with research is creative work. And I liked your comment about merging those a bit.
So I'm going to throw in this one because I find this topic innately just super frustrating. As Larry knows, because Larry and I we fight about this. We fight about this constantly. I mean, I find, I grew up in a family of academics, and I find, relative to the question as an academic, the relationship of academic and practice is almost impossible. I mean, because in my own experiences and practices, what I find, and there's that great T-shirt, ape shall not kill ape, right? And then there's the one, architect shall not lie to architects. But in truth, in practice, you find yourself continuously bending the truth. Right, bending the truth to get a good building built, bending the truth to, and as an intellectual, I find that just utterly bankrupt. And trying to get those two things to cross, I just find this kind of perpetually difficult problem. Does that make sense? I think there's different kinds of research. I mean, I do think, Mineo said it kind of most perfectly, that most of the architecture of the last 20 years is finding form and then justifying it intellectually after the fact, as opposed to actually having a kind of theory and then pursuing that. So all I'm saying is that back here on this back row, I'm sitting here going, no, this is not an easily resolvable issue, because in fact, research-based is quite fundamentally different than, I think, than academic research. And actually being honest about that is more difficult than I think than we are. If I could just be slightly negative about this, or that's just my own sense.
Actually, you're all leaning into the last question that we came up with, and after that, it will be informal over drinks and meal. But looking into the future, how has your practice changed in recent years? What's happening now? And when I say this design community, I don't mean just Rice, and I certainly mean the Architectural League too, and you with each other provide mutual support moving forward. I mean, Gary, you talked about the paucity of those opportunities. What more do you have to say about that?
It's a good question. We're so busy trying to stay afloat at times, you often don't think about, how the future should unfold or will unfold. But it's often just reacting to what we find in the marketplace with projects and with our clients. And kind of like your comment, it's somewhat frustrating knowing that our practice, which is so focused on our connection to our client and understanding of their culture, and most importantly, getting them to understand their own culture, which ties into the last two questions tremendously, because so many clients, so many architects they put everything through their own filter, but can you put yourself into the head or filter what the goals or vision or where the culture that you're pursuing should be? And so working to promote that approach, which requires clients to pull back and not think of things through their own eyes, but think of things through the eyes of their institution or their own culture. And it's getting more difficult to pursue that because, frankly, there's not many old guys like me floating around that have been doing this for a while, and even your client base, you may have young people in your clients that have a very different vision and a very different generation that are pursuing things that are more of the now, and frankly, less of the future. I find myself going into the past and into the future. In fact, I believe I'm a Kurt Vonnegut character. Yeah, I don't know if that answered the question or not. Did it? Probably not. Get started.
I would answer that question by saying that, particularly in our office, it's become more or less a virtual practice. And in the past, we had 10 or 12 full-time employees. We weren't as nimble as we are now. We can put together teams. We collaborate actually even more with others than we did before. And I think from that standpoint, it's changed our outlook on how we approach things. And I think in a way also to reinforce our design process is that it works better with multiple constituencies. So I think from our standpoint, it's become a much different practice than we had before, and I think one that at least has served us really well.
Yeah, I might pivot the conversation to talk more about the students that we're graduating now and kind of the people that are kind of moving into our offices. And we've always taken pride that in architecture that we're problem solvers. We're trained to be problem solvers. And in today's day where information is so readily available, it's so easy to develop options of kind of solutions, and there's such a variety of things that I think sometimes when we get new members in our office that kind of come through, we find that we don't have decision makers. Like we have people who are capable of producing really beautiful options for us to all discuss, and they still have a lot of ambition at times. But the ability to kind of make a decision and move a project forward, you don't solve problems unless you're able to make decisions. And I think that's the piece that if I was offering to any of the academics here as we are talking about the people that we're getting into our office from academia, I would encourage you to think about, about the decision-making aspect of your education. So.
Oh, sure. I think one of the things that we're continuing to think about is how do we collaborate with people that may not have the full resources available to them to actually hire the architect, right? And so we did mention earlier that we did start a nonprofit, and that is one way that we think that we can start to engage these people a little bit more by, it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? We want to value what architects do, but we also want to provide the greatest good to the communities that we serve. And so by reaching out, having these conversations with these groups, we can start to utilize some of our resources and knowledge to actually go after grants and go after individual funding for some of these groups that could help them build the structure that they want to build the place that they want, and also to support what we do as well and provide the soft costs for some of the services that are out there. So I think that's some way that we're starting to think about how we could interact a little bit differently and a little bit more fully. There's been a lot of conversations about architects as developers, but how does this transition a little bit more, and how can we take a bigger swing at some of these issues?
Yeah, I'll just come at it from a non-academic standpoint, because other than sitting in on juries at UT, I don't have that much connection with it. And I find it interesting, I've been in this 30 years, you get a little bored of doing some things and you want to focus on the things you're really interested in, and that's come down to program. at this point. And I think that's where there's a huge hole in both academic and practice, is that things are changing wildly politically and in other ways, and I don't think architecture's caught up to it. I think, you get the clients coming to you and they want the same things. You want a living room and a dining room and this sort of thing with big views. Some of that doesn't make any sense anymore, and it is just an old thing in mind. And even in projects at schools, I see that same kind of thinking, and I think it's time to come up with really wildly different ways of presenting a program or a project for students to work on in some way that really does engage how things are changing. We do it in our office, like I said, by just picking projects that we feel like doing that address some of those. Like we had to do one, the Zero House, which was years ago, but it was a freestanding project that completely powered itself and collected rainwater and all this kind of stuff. And it got a lot of attention for that. It got in the press, and we always focus on press that's not just to architects, to other people. So we tried to get it in, more widespread publications, and we still do that a lot. So I think there's a form of education in that way that doesn't necessarily have to do with academia, but I think academia could support that as well.
No, the last one. Okay. No, wonderful discussion, but I will add that one of the challenges that all of us face in a world of declining resources and even intelligence, if I'm bold to say it, we are in the amazing process by which we can promote architecture to really be a field like no other field in the construction of the built environment. And with my clients, I never discuss fees, time that it's going to take. I purposely interview them to see if they're willing to create this conversation that is going to make their world much better. Regardless of the budget. I mean, I've been very fortunate to work in many milieux and with different budgets, and it's the least interesting thing about architecture. The most interesting thing is to create this conversation, and I invite students and everyone in this room to always exist in that moment of the predicament of speculation. And when I quoted Rainer Maria Rilke earlier on today, it's the most beautiful idea about architecture, that we are here for a reason, and often not to invent the tree, the house, not even the tower or the column, but we're here to remind those that come to us, those that come for our services or whatever we want to call it, to make those things more intense than the things themselves ever dream of existing. And that to me is where it wakes up every morning on the possibility of architecture.
Thank you, Carlos. On that high note, on behalf of Jacob, Anne, and myself, I want to thank you for the beautiful presentations, for your thoughtful answers to our questions, and to invite everybody to join us in James Sterling's jury room for a reception and continued conversation more informally. Thank you all so much.